Imagine a Christmas table so dazzling that the silverware alone costs more than most people's cars, where truffles arrive by helicopter, and where a single bottle of wine has survived 3 centuries just to be uncorked for a single December night. That is the legend whispered across Europe about Monaco, the tiny kingdom with billion-dollar yachts outside its windows and royalty who understand luxury better than almost anyone alive. The world wants to know, what does Christmas look like in the playground of the rich? What happens when the Grimaldi royal household decides to host the most extravagant Christmas banquet ever attempted? Monaco is a place where fantasy is treated like basic infrastructure. A city-state smaller than most neighborhoods, yet its skyline is coated in marble, and its harbor shimmers with superyachts the size of commercial ferries. The royal family, descended from centuries of ceremonial glamour, has long understood that Monaco's version of tradition is business. Wealth attracts wealth. And Christmas, especially in a Catholic monarchy, has always carried a strange mixture of devotion, diplomacy, and excess. Every rumor about this holiday feast claims it exists not to show off, but to reinforce the royal family's symbolic role as custodians of European elegance. The story begins with a problem no ordinary household faces, when billionaires send confidential messages asking if they can contribute to the holiday banquet. What does a royal steward say? The elite want access, because in Monaco, the Christmas invitation list may be more valuable than a defense contract. Some come for prestige, some for charity, but most for visibility. The Grimaldis have hosted Christmas receptions before, but whispers claim that one particular year, spoken about in hushed tones, became the most expensive royal Christmas banquet ever attempted, a celebration where money vanished like snowfall on the Côte d'Azur. On the Mediterranean coastline, Christmas doesn't look like the snowy postcards. It looks like imported for trees refrigerated against Monaco's mild climate. It looks like decorators flown in from Florence to install Renaissance-style table displays. It looks like 30-foot wreaths hung against palace walls that have stood since the Middle Ages. The royal chefs, many of them trained in Michelin-starred Parisian kitchens, begin preparations weeks ahead. Their challenge is not cooking, but invention. When the guest list includes oil magnates, tech billionaires, and international aristocrats, ordinary indulgence becomes boring. The legend says the menu began with a single idea, the rarest ingredients on earth, but presented with Monaco precision. The chefs requested white truffles from Alber, valued at over $7,000 per kilogram, then insisted that they arrive the same morning they would be shaved over handmade pasta. Iranian beluga caviar was placed into chilled gold dishes. Wagyu beef from Japan's Hyogo prefecture, raised with sake massages, was portioned into symmetrical slices. The cost of ingredients kept rising until the palace treasurer reportedly sighed and said, "It's Christmas. Do what must be done." Wine alone became a private competition among collectors. One guest offered to uncork a Chateau Margaux from the early 1900s, valued at 6 figures. Another rumored contributor insisted on a Burgundy harvested before World War II. What began as a dinner transformed into a silent auction of pride. But in Monaco, this behavior is not crass, it is almost cultural. Wealth is a language, spoken through taste. Old money speaks in vintages. New money speaks in volume. The monarchy's task is to orchestrate both without appearing impressed by either. But the most remarkable detail of this story isn't extravagance, it's timing. The banquet unfolded during a period when Monaco's public image needed reinforcement. The world sees Monaco as a stamp-sized sanctuary for the wealthy, but to locals, the palace still represents heritage. Christmas was a chance to remind Europe that elegance and generosity can coexist. The banquet reportedly combined luxury with fundraising for children's hospitals across the region. Critics argued that charity should not require a dining spectacle, but Europe has always debated the ethics of monarchy. Behind closed doors, palace staff felt pressure that ordinary workers can't imagine. Logistics teams had to coordinate refrigerated trucks from Switzerland, pastry teams from Lyon, and florists from Milan. An entire corridor of the palace was converted into a chocolate sculpture laboratory. Historians were consulted about medieval Christmas traditions, because the monarchy wanted symbolic continuity. It wasn't enough for the banquet to be delicious, it had to represent centuries of ceremonial authority. And that meant spectacle. The decorations became their own legend. Baccarat crystal goblets, hand-engraved cutlery, embroidered table runners commissioned from French ateliers. Candles poured from rare beeswax blends to produce a subtle amber glow. Even the chairs were controversial, antique seats borrowed from royal storage, reupholstered in Italian velvet for the occasion. One designer supposedly said, "If a guest worth $50 billion sits down, he must feel poor compared to the palace." What kind of guests attend such a banquet? Diplomats attempting to secure future alliances. Heirs to energy conglomerates. Celebrities who recognize that monarchy still grants legitimacy. The invitations are private, never advertised, never confirmed, but attendees leak details because rumor has become Monaco's second industry. Some names are mythologized beyond recognition. But one truth remains: nobody attends without expectations. For some, the evening is a chance to be seen. For others, it is a test: are you wealthy enough to remain unimpressed? The royal table stretched across a hall once used for military strategy. That night, it became a theater stage. Guests were seated according to influence rather than friendship. Imagine a cryptocurrency billionaire beside a European aristocrat who despises digital wealth. Imagine a shipping magnate beside a Hollywood actress. The monarchy thrives on this friction. Harmony is boring. Status is narrative. Christmas, strangely, becomes a negotiation. Yet beneath all this opulence lies an invisible tension. Monaco is rich, but small. Its monarchy has no army, minimal land, and relies on diplomacy rather than domination. So while outsiders mock extravagance, insiders understand the banquet as political theater. Monaco cannot fight wars, but it can host dinners where power is redistributed across a table. Christmas becomes an instrument of soft power, disguised beneath truffle shavings and velvet ribbons. The main course remains the most discussed mystery. Some claim it was a pyramid of seafood transported from Norwegian waters overnight. Others swear it involved game birds raised on a private estate in France. But the most persuasive account describes a tasting procession, 9 miniature courses, each representing a region of Europe. The logic was symbolic unity. Monaco might be small, but it stands at a cultural intersection. The banquet was storytelling through cuisine. The desserts, however, were unquestionably real, because confectioners bragged. The palace commissioned a chocolate replica of Monaco itself, with gold leaf districts and sugar glass yacht hulls. There were chestnut pastries scented with rum. There were candied citrus peels collected from palace orchards. And finally, a towering croquembouche engineered like architecture, held together with spun caramel and ambition. Guests cheered, but critics whispered, "This is wealth beyond empathy." Yet the emotional center of the banquet was surprisingly ordinary. At a certain hour, the royal family greeted the children of palace staff, offering small gifts, speaking about gratitude and faith. Cameras were not invited. This was the part of Christmas untouched by market value. The monarchy understands symbolism. Luxury attracts headlines, but humility protects legitimacy. A palace survives not through diamonds, but through stories, especially stories that feel tender. To outsiders, this banquet may seem alien. But consider human psychology. Everyone, regardless of background, dreams of a moment where scarcity disappears, where you are allowed to live without limits. Monaco is simply the physical form of that dream. The banquet represented the fantasy of control. If you can command the world's finest ingredients, perhaps you can command fate itself. But wealth does not protect anyone from time, loss, or memory. Some attendees later confessed that the most powerful moment came not from the food, but from the silence afterward, when music stopped, conversation paused, and guests realized that even impossible luxury cannot slow the passage of a single winter night. Christmas reminds monarchs and millionaires alike that life is fleeting. The ocean outside the palace, silent and black, refused to acknowledge their influence. Nature always wins. Over the years, reports of the banquet spiraled into myth. Journalists exaggerate costs, some claiming the feast reached 8 figures. Economists complain. Critics insist the money could have funded hospitals outright. Supporters emphasize the charitable proceeds. But myths are rarely about accuracy, they are about cultural function. The legend of Monaco's Christmas banquet reinforces one message: royalty still shapes imagination. For ordinary people watching from afar, Monaco represents contradiction. Many struggle to afford groceries during winter. Yet they watch news segments about caviar and 200-year-old wines. And strangely, they keep watching, not because they endorse inequality, but because they crave spectacle during hardship. Holiday seasons amplify emotion. People hope someone, somewhere, is living joy without compromise. It gives fantasy a place in the world. Christmas in Monaco also reflects a universal truth: humans anchor identity in ritual. Whether families gather around a plastic table in a studio apartment or crystal chandeliers in a palace hall, the psychology is the same. We eat together to feel safe. We decorate to impose beauty on chaos. We share gifts to pretend that generosity is instinct rather than choice. Monaco is simply an exaggerated mirror held up to the same human instincts. The most interesting voices come from palace workers. Behind the glamour, exhaustion ruled. Staff stood for 16-hour shifts polishing crystal, preparing pastries, ironing linen that cost more than their monthly wage. Many came from ordinary backgrounds: Portugal, Italy, North Africa, and saw the banquet as employment, not fantasy. Their memories interpret the night differently. Not indulgence, but labor. Not magic, but logistics. Spectacle depends on invisible people. When the final guests drifted toward their yachts, the palace grew quiet. Workers cleared plates worth thousands. Truffle crumbs were swept into waste bins. Half-finished wines were reclaimed by staff only when protocol allowed. The grandeur evaporated. This contrast, spectacle followed by cleanup, defines monarchy. Opulence has a lifespan of hours. What remains is architecture and legacy. So why does the legend endure? Because it satisfies three appetites: the elite hunger for recognition, the public hunger for fantasy, and the monarchy's hunger for relevance. Christmas just becomes the stage. People forget that Europe's royal families survive not through constitutional power, but through cultural storytelling. A Christmas banquet becomes a national brand. In truth, the most expensive royal Christmas banquet may never be audited, confirmed, or repeated. Maybe it cost millions. Maybe less. Maybe the myth grew larger with each retelling. But storytelling is value creation. Luxury is partly psychological. If the world believes Monaco hosts the most glamorous Christmas on earth, then perception becomes capital. The legend becomes currency. As night fell over the palace and the sea turned silver in the moonlight, Monaco returned to what it has always been: a contradiction wrapped in charm. A kingdom built on spectacle, yet small enough to walk across. A monarchy that survives through pageantry, yet insists it represents unity. The banquet remains lodged in the collective imagination, not because of caviar or crystal, but because it asks a question that lives within every human heart: if you could design one perfect night, unconstrained by limits, what would it look like?